Good morning.
Sorry.
We just finished having our usual starting chat. I'm going to open us with prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for all that you give us. Lord, lead us in the direction that you wish us to go. Let us know your will. Lord, we are so blessed to live in a country where we can freely study your word as we understand it. Lord, help us understand it clearly. Help us to understand how these words written so many years ago are still very meaningful for our life. Our human condition really hasn't really changed. Lord, we are so pleased to have your word. We're so pleased to have your Son. We're so pleased to have his grace and salvation. In your Son's name I pray, amen. Okay, so Dennis, can you read 7:4?
I have great confidence in you. I take great pride in you. I am greatly encouraged in all our troubles. My joy knows no bounds.
Oh, so what's going on here? He's been fussing at him for most of the 1 Corinthians letters and a good part of the 2 Corinthians letters. And he had sent them that severe letter that we don't have a copy of where he really fussed at him. And now he's saying, I have great pride in you. I have great confidence in you. I'm greatly encouraged in all your troubles. My joy knows no bounds. Come in, come in.
Maybe the letter had some good news.
Yes. So we're going to have news. Most commentators think that, some people thought that this was continuation of 2:14, but most commentators feel that this is what we call a hinge point. He's finishing one section of the letter, and now he's going on to another. So it's kind of a break. And as parents, and he's treating the Corinthians in some ways as the parent-child relationship. As parents, after you have scolded your kids, what do you usually do?
Ignore them.
No, that's not what you're supposed to do. Encourage them. Yeah, so, you screwed up. You did something wrong. But I still love you. And I still have, like you. I still have great pride in you. And I have confidence in you that you won't screw up too many more times in the future. So, this is going along. He's somewhat treating them as in the parent-child role. And he's been trying to correct them, which all of us have done to our children in the past. And if you're doing, a good job not ignoring him like Larry, I'm sure he didn't do that. But anytime you've corrected somebody, whether or not it's a child or if you're a supervisor position at work, and you said, you didn't do this correctly, generally you don't leave it at that. You at some point, at the end of that, unless they're just incorrigible and you're going to get rid of them, which you can't with your children, you end up saying something along the line that this sentence says, where, I really like you, I still have great pride in you, I think you're going to do fine, we just need to fix this problem. And so he's finishing off this section that he's been talking to up to verse 7 chapters and now moving on. Because as Larry said, he's going to have good news. So Larry, 7:5, please.
When we came into Macedonia, this body of ours had no rest, for we were harassed at every turn. Conflicts on the outside, fears within.
So this section is going to be Titus's arrival comforts Paul in his affliction. Well, first he's saying what he's afflicted about. This body, otherwise in Greek, this flesh, it doesn't have the negative connotations, the word used here, that sometimes in the New Testament when they're contrasting flesh and spirit, but it's his body, his flesh. And so body has no rest. We are harassed with conflicts on outside fears within. So both internal and external, he's stressed and he has no rest. I'm at the age, and I think most of us here are at the age that, you know, we're kind of tired a good part of the time. You know, we've lived a good life and done a lot of things, but we're not 16 or 21 anymore. And so, how does that make you feel sometimes? You know, how many of us have no pain at all? As a friend of mine said, pain just tells you you're still alive. I don't know if that was nice, but that's what he told me. And most of us, you know, have some stress internally. We're anxious. I think all of us have something to be anxious about today. But we have anxiety about situations at home. And so Paul is saying that, you know, I've been under a lot of stress and feel like I've been harassed. We know from Acts that he had a lot of conflicts with his ministry. All kinds of things happened to him. And so he had external stress, but he also was anxious. He was anxious about each one of his ministries, and particularly he's anxious about the Corinthian church. And so when you're stressed like that, how do you feel? How do you feel when you have a lot of things going on and you feel tired and achy, but you also feel anxious? How do you feel?
Discouraged.
Discouraged, right. You feel discouraged, you feel down, you have some despair that things are going to get better. And so he's been like this. Okay. Lance, 7:6, please.
Number 6, right?
Yeah, 6, 7,
But
6.
God who comforts the downcast comforted us by the coming of Titus.
Okay, so remember Titus, Paul had gone to Corinth and left fairly abruptly because whatever happened there, the church was not supporting him against what he was trying to correct. And so later he had sent Titus, who has been one of his helpers, to see what was going on with the church and try to maybe soften what he had told them and see if they would fix the problem. Where else do we hear about Titus in the Bible?
There's another letter that Paul wrote to Titus.
Yeah, he wrote letters to Titus, and Titus is also mentioned in Acts. So, Titus was an important person in Paul's ministry, and so he sent somebody. You might think of Paul being the leader, but somebody that was very high up in Paul's circle. And so it wasn't, sending a private. He sent somebody that was, high in Paul's esteem and in his circle to see how things were going on with Corinth. And so he says, God who comforts the downcast. And so when you're achy and stressed and despair, who comforts you? I'm sorry?
The Lord.
The Lord. That's who we should go to and ask for help and guidance. So Paul's saying that's where he got comforted. And God comforted him. Because he got good news from Titus. Okay, Charmaine, 7, please.
And not only by his coming, but also by the comfort you have given him. He told us about your longing for me, your deep sorrow, your ardent concern for me, so that my joy was greater than your comfort.
Okay, so Titus brought him good news. You know, had good news from his visit. He had good news from Titus that the Corinthians still cherished him, still longed to see him. You know, obviously if the relationship was bad, if you're really having a bad relationship with somebody, you really want to see them? No. You know, you don't want to see them. You don't want to have anything to do with them. You don't want to deal with them. At least that's most of us, that's how humanly we deal with situations like that. So if I'm having a trouble with Charmaine, do I really want to see her and talk to her? No, I don't want to see and talk to her. Unless I am trying to make amends and for some repentance for something I might have thought I might have done to Charmaine. Or if I think she's going to come otherwise. Otherwise, I don't want to have anything to do with her. And so Paul is quite happy that the Corinthians were longing to see him. And they were sorrowful for what had happened, you know. Most of us, when we have done something that we regret, feel some sorrow, you know, that I'm sorry that, you know, I hurt, I'm picking on Charmaine because she just read. I'm sorry I hurt, you know, Charmaine's feelings from what I said. I feel really bad about that. And so that's, to me, a sign that people are trying to repent whatever action. And so I think what Paul is seeing here is that Corinthians, after his visit, after his severe letter, basically repented about the situation. Now, he's never ever clear in the letter exactly what was going on. You know, there's a lot of guesses, but we don't really know what the situation was. But whatever it was quite significant. And so when you have a bad relationship with somebody and it becomes clear that that person wants to resolve that and get back in good graces with you, normally how do you feel? Well, to be honest about it, sometimes you don't want to forgive them because you're mad at them, but that's not a very Christian way of looking at it. And so most of us should hopefully in a Christian life feel joyful from some kind of resolution of whatever that bad relationship was. I mean, admittedly, it's hard sometimes. Have you ever had that situation where you had somebody did something or said something or, you know, got under your skin and they kind of want to make up, but you're still having a hard time with that? I know it's happened to me, but has it happened to any of you folks? I see some shaking of the heads. As a Christian, what should we be doing?
You should reconcile.
You should reconcile. You should try to reconcile. And but is it easy? No, I don't think it's easy. It's one of the hardest things that I think I have done is when that has happened, trying to get over my unhappiness about whatever that situation was.
Yeah, because if they keep doing what they do again and again, it's really hard to trust them, you know?
Well, that's a different situation. To me, the one I'm trying to talk about is if I've, again, using Charmaine, done something, let's say she's done something to me, and she wants to make amends, she wants to have a reconciliation. Even though whatever she did to me might have really bothered me, I should try as a Christian to try to have a reconciliation and forgive. Your situation where the person continues to do whatever they do, I think that's a situation that it's clear that we can then cut them off. You know, Jesus speaking said that we should forgive them, but if they don't, then we should treat them like tax collectors, is what he said, which means we don't have anything at all to do with them. Nothing personal, nothing social, nothing at all. Just do with them. So if somebody does that, then we should, not necessarily we can forgive them, but we shouldn't be doing anything more with it. The situation that Karen's talking about, where the abuser, to be honest about it, it's usually a male, continues to abuse their partner, and after each abuse asks for forgiveness. I think at some point, to be honest about it, the person that's being abused has to move on, because that pattern unfortunately continues. And in that way, I think anybody feel that way too? I think the situation is where somebody continues to do something and ask for forgiveness and continues to do something and ask for forgiveness. At some point, we have to stop that, especially if it's something that's pretty bad. And because Larry has dealt with abuse a lot in his previous work. And my experience is sometimes those situations, the abuser escalates. That is, they go from verbal to physical and getting worse. Larry, would you say that's true?
Yep. It just increases in intensity.
Okay, so he's really happy. And if somebody that you've had a problem with wants to make amends, especially if somebody's important to you that's done something, I think we all should feel happy. I know it's sometimes hard to give up our anger and bitterness and unhappiness, but that's what we're supposed to do. But it doesn't mean, as a Christian, that we are a throw rug that people can stomp on all the time. That doesn't make us. To me, forgiveness, is spiritual. It's not physical. And what I mean by that is, if I've done something criminal, and still picking on Charmaine, because you're the last one to read, I'm sorry. If I've done something criminal to Charmaine, she might forgive me for my transgression if I ask, but it doesn't mean that secularly the police, the courts should not deal with whatever that criminal action is. And so to me, a Christian forgiveness, say somebody burglarized your house, you might forgive the burglar, but you shouldn't not allow the society to deal with the consequences of that. Does anybody want to say something different or agree with me on that one? That's my personal feeling, how as a Christian I should forgive spiritually, but doesn't mean that I'm going to not press charges that somebody broke into my house or did something like that. Does that make sense? I will let somebody argue with me if they feel differently.
Where I was teaching, I got my wallet stolen, and we found two kids who did it. And just by coincidence, it was my cousin's good friend's kids. But they had reputations in our school, so I had called the mom. And the kids were at, a place like Tilt, spending money that she didn't even give them.
Mhm.
So we knew, we had a feel it was that they did it. So my cousin came in home, and that night she brought the two kids to my house with the mom, and they admitted that they did it.
Mhm.
I got my wallet back, and the county had to go down into the drain to look at it because it was inaccessible. But they wanted to get the evidence before it rained, so public safety, whatever, they went down to go get it. Anyway, so Thurston and I went to go visit the family because the thing is, I'm not going to press charges for that. So the deal was, if they came to church and they accepted being counseled by Thurston that I wouldn't press charges,
Mhm.
but they chose not to, so we pressed charges. But the mother was for it too,
Mhm.
because she didn't want her son to continue doing this,
Mhm.
so that's what happened.
Yeah, that puts in the added problem of the fact that they're minors. How do you deal with that? I think that was done correctly. If they would accept consequences and I would put the caveat, if you do this again, I'm still gonna press charges. That's probably my caveat with that. But they didn't, so at least they get reprimanded, but also you might feel, well, they're minors, that's not gonna go on a permanent record. Hopefully this will be a wake-up call. What happened with them, can you?
Well, they were stealing stuff from cars in the plaza. We had heard about it.
Mhm.
And I don't know if it continued or not,
Mhm.
but I kind of have to think that it did because they were like,
Okay, so sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't, but
I don't know.
I assume you don't leave your wallet around them anymore. And so sometimes we have to deal with it.
As a Christian, if somebody asks you for forgiveness for something, and but even if you don't really feel it, should you say I forgive you even if you don't really feel it?
Anybody have a feeling to answer that? How do you?
I don't see how you can give something you don't have. You don't have forgiveness in your heart. How can you forgive?
The way I would deal with that is I would ask the Lord to help me forgive that person. I might not immediately forgive them, but I would say, I'd probably tell them I'm going to have to pray about that. We're supposed to do that, but as Larry has said, and I have done, it's sometimes very hard. And so what do? What I think it's the biblical thing is ask the Lord to help me with that. Because I do not feel, and I think Larry's point is, it's a false forgiveness. I don't really feel like I ought to forgive you for whatever you've done, but you've asked me to forgive you, and I'm having a hard time with it. And I'm going to have to say, I'm going to have to pray about that, and I'll get back with you, is how I would deal with that. And hopefully I would get some help with that. I think I've told this story. One of my neighbor's grandkids broke into my house many years ago now and stole my wife's jewelry, which mostly we got back. We got caught. But what he also got out of the jewelry box is my kids' baby teeth, which we didn't get back. And it took me years, because the house is about 5 houses from mine. Driving by there and not thinking, well, I'm going to throw a Molotov cocktail in the garage. I literally would think about that, and every time I would do that, I'd have to say, help me, Lord, get over this. It took me about a decade. I'm being honest about it. Sometimes it's really hard. He didn't ask for forgiveness, and he ended up dying in prison in the mainland, because this is about 30 years ago. But because he continued, like these kids, to burglarize. He was a grandson of one of our judges. So just because you're somebody prominent, son or grandson, doesn't always mean that you're going to turn out to be good.
Did you get the baby tooth back?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you over the track.
Did you get the baby tooth back?
No, never got him back. That was what I was so mad about. Because, the tooth fairies look lots of money, a quarter each. But, we had them in a little container, and that's what I was mad about. We got almost all the jewelry back, but we didn't get that back. And I was really unhappy. Actually went around the neighborhood looking in the trash cans and things to see if I could find a container, thinking he threw it away. But it took me literally almost a decade of going by that house, which is one of the ways of coming down here and drive by it.
Yeah, that's hard to forget, I mean,
Yeah,
for that long, I mean, because it's a baby too.
yeah. They were really, really made me unhappy, so, but I had to keep asking, help me with this, and finally, it finally seemed to click, and I don't think about bombing the house anymore. When I drive by. But I was really unhappy. I don't know if any of you have similar things, but I think to answer your question is that, yes, we're supposed to forgive, but sometimes it's hard. And who do we turn for to help with that is where we need to ask for help. Help me forgive this person. But if the person continues to sin against us, like what you're talking about, I think we can forgive them a few times, but at some point we're going to have to say, enough is enough. You know, you continue to do this. Yes?
Is it true forgiveness if you have forgiven the person, but you're not willing to accept them back into your life and want to keep your distance from them? Is that true forgiveness?
Anybody want to try to answer that? How did other people feel? Debbie, you want to give a shot at that?
Maybe it's not true forgiveness because you have there's this barrier still. You know, this relationship is kind of broken. So I don't know. Somebody did something to me at work, and he came over and asked for forgiveness, and I forgave him, and we've been friends, and even when we see each other today, it's like it never happened. I think that's true forgiveness, because even if you really hurt me at work, I just decided to forgive him. If you have this, this even a little bit of a barrier, I don't know if in your heart you really forgave that person. I'm not sure.
Sometimes it depends on the circumstance, that particular transgression or whatever the person did. But, I think there may be situations you can truly believe and you forgive that person, but you don't want anything to do with them. And it could be circumstantial, maybe you want to keep that person away from his family or whatever. So it really depends on the circumstances.
Because understanding, okay, so maybe if there's a real understanding of why that transgression was done, and it was like almost beyond that person's ability to not do whatever, maybe you can, but yeah, you want to keep that person away from your family.
Yeah, so my answer to that is that I still break things down in spiritual and social. And so if somebody's done something to me, and as Dennis said, circumstantial, if it's something that I don't think is going to be ongoing, it's not something that severely hurt me or my family, and maybe if I think it was inadvertent, but it happened, if somebody asks for forgiveness, I'm probably going to forgive them and continue to have whatever relationship I had with them. But if somebody did something to me more egregious to me or my family and asked for forgiveness, I might forgive them. I still think that's true forgiveness, but I don't want to do anything more with them. I think what we have to look at with forgiveness is we forgive them. But they suffer the consequences of whatever that was. And the consequences might be that I really don't want to deal with them anymore. And so my answer is yes, you can have true forgiveness, but you don't really want to deal with them anymore.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
So in Lynn's case, if she forgave the person and she's no longer grieved by that, then she's forgiven him, because it's you that gets hurt in the unforgiveness. So if you're no longer grieved by it, then you have given it. You really have to.
So in my case, it was not true forgiveness, because every time I went by that house, it was only the last time where it finally clicked, was there a true forgiveness. And so my answer is what Dennis said, is very circumstantial. I might forgive somebody, and if the situation was a one-time, what would we say now, one-off, not likely to happen again, and didn't, the circumstances weren't very awful, and the person was truly repentant, I think like Debbie's situation, where you might continue to have a good relationship. But I can see other situations where it wasn't like that, and the person asked for forgiveness, and because the circumstances, you forgave them, but the consequences of what they did is that you don't want to do anything more. And Debbie is right. Who do you really look at? You look at yourself. Have I forgiven him? If it's not bothering me anymore, as Debbie said, grieving me, making me sorrowful about that, then I've truly forgiven him. Doesn't mean I really want to deal with him anymore. And I think that's true forgiveness, yes.
Larry and I used to do this children in transition as volunteers before. One of the attorneys, he shared with the man about his ex-wife and how much anger there was with him towards her. And he said one day he came to his with the thought that he was just going to apologize to her for whatever he did and ask her to forgive, ask her to forgive him for all his transgressions towards her. And then he said he would forgive her for all the things that she did to him that were mean and hateful and all that. And he said that for him, it's kind of in line with what Debbie said, for him, it freed him from all this hatred and bitterness and all that ugly stuff that he carried on for years. And then after that, he was able to focus on giving out love to his daughter, who was caught in all of this. And that always stuck with me. It was something that, and he said it didn't matter if she accepted his apology or not. It was for him.
Yeah.
That he
So
apologized.
who does it hurt? Who does unforgiveness really hurt? As Karen is pointing, it hurts me. If I'm still picking on Charmaine. If she does something to me, maybe I ought to move on to Lynn. Okay, if Lynn has done something to me, and I have unforgiveness to her, is it bothering Lynn? Most likely not. Most likely it's not. Who is it really bothering? It's bothering me. And I have seen in my business people that have never forgiven something. And who does it harm? It harms them. And so the unforgiveness, to me, one of the bright things about our religion is this forgiveness business. Because I see that in my business, the medical business, all the time. Unforgiveness for whatever the situation was harms a person that's not forgiven. And as your fellow said, who does that help when you forgive? It didn't help his ex-wife, but it helped him, and it sounded like, if I understand your story well, it helped his relationship with his daughter. And so I think one of the beauties of our religion is this a business to forgive. You might say, well, even if we don't believe all the other stuff, that Christ forgives us, human forgiveness heals us and makes us much more mentally and physically healthy, because that unforgiveness drains on you. That anger is not good for you.
Well, I'm going to share.
Okay, go ahead.
I have 12 in my family, right? But
Mhm.
then I have these two sisters that they don't get along with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why, the reason. And then one sister borrowed money from the other one, but she never got her money back.
Mm-hmm.
And this has been going on for years. And one day we happened to be in Las Vegas, right, in the room,
Mm-hmm.
and they were both sisters were drinking. And I guess somehow they still hate each other, and things came up about what they're doing, about the money situation. I happened to be there, and then the one that owes the money, she pinched me over here. And it was real sore, because this part of your skin is very sore. And, I was really upset, what happened. And, she hasn't said sorry or anything to this day, and I haven't talked to her for a while after that happened. But then, I forgive her. I feel better myself, this is gonna hurt me, knowing what she did to me, all these years. And so I forgive her, so I feel better about it now, so, I let it go,
Who bothers you most is the ones closest to you.
Yeah, so,
I mean, if I got pinched by somebody, well, I don't think I'd be pinched anymore, but if I was much younger got pinched by somebody I didn't know, I'd probably get a little upset, but if it was somebody that I knew that I shouldn't be doing that.
yeah, they still don't talk to each other to this day.
I think most families have a situation like that, and when you see it from the outside, you can see, why don't they just get over whatever it is? Because it usually is something that either one of them didn't have any control over, or they really should have looked at it differently. My advice, if you're ever lending money to a family member, consider it a gift and don't expect it to come back. If it comes back, it's great, but if somebody needs to borrow money from you and you feel that you're going to lend it to them, my advice, which is how I dealt with family issues, is don't expect it back. And then it's a lot easier. You don't get too upset about it. So don't lend them something you really need on one side, but if they give it back to you, it's fine. But otherwise you get this situation where one is angry because they never got the money back, and the other one is angry because the other one wants it back and probably has at one point might not been able to. And now that's gone on for years, so they both set in their position and it's impossible to get them to move. At least you sound like you were trying to be the peacemaker between the two. But who usually gets blasted in that situation? The peacemaker. You can be, sometimes you got to be careful when you try to get in between two people that are really angry. So they still don't talk to each other?
No, they don't.
So Charmaine, they still don't talk to each other? Or get along with each other? So why were they in Las Vegas? That's
Yeah, they happened to be there because the one that pitched me, her boyfriend goes bowling. So we went up there to bowl.
Oh, so they weren't there intentionally? Okay.
No, we were kind of like all went together.
Okay.
What did she pinch you?
Right here.
No, there.
This is sore,
Why did she pinch you?
Why did she pinch me?
Because she was mad at her sister? She was angry at her sister, that's why she pinched you?
Yeah, they were drinking too.
And
No, but some of us are sure they asked to pinch you.
she wouldn't do anything bad. Knowing Charmaine, her sweet nature.
Picking her aggressive behavior out of you. No one
Yes,
will
yeah.
pay her back.
Yeah.
Been going on.
Sometimes it's unreconcilable. A situation is, especially for unbelievers, it's unreconcilable. I have a sister like that too.
Say it again, please.
It's unreconcilable for some unbelievers.
Yeah, and I've seen that. It's just, without the ability to forgive, whatever that situation just festers forever. And I think all of us that have big enough families probably have some kind of situation, some level in that. And it's really hard if for people that are not believers to forgive. Because they don't have the example that Christ has given us, and the instructions that Christ has given us, and the commands that Christ has given us about this. And again, whose benefit is it? It's not for Christ, it's not for the person that we're forgiving, it's for us. It's our benefit to forgive somebody. Because it really makes you feel not in despair, not angry. All these negative thoughts that you have that are not, I don't think are good for you. But I've seen people that are not believers carry to their grave some kind of unhappiness or anger at somebody else and never forgave them. And it harmed their relationship. Mother, child, brother, sister, sister, sister. I think all of us has probably seen that. All I've ever been able to do in that situation is say, who is it hurting, you or the other person? And point that out. And sometimes that clicks, but sometimes people just can't get over that. And so your sisters are probably never going to get over it. You know? All you can do is point out, who is this really hurting? You know, who is it really harming? But sometimes they're so set and don't have the example, don't have the commands about how to deal with that. But the peacemakers sometimes get in the middle and get pinched. And so just be careful about that. You know, I think, you know, unfortunately in Larry's business, I think we often see, you know, the police officers going out to domestic. Who gets shot? It's the police officer. You know, it's, at least in the news I see that. I'm not sure that that's happened here. But, you know, if you're being the peacemaker among people, be a little careful about that. You know, how that you can try to be as neutral as you can, but just be real careful about that. Not that you shouldn't do it, but just recognize where you're going and what you're trying to get out of it, and how you better not be on one side or the other if you're truly going to try to do that. But I promised people that I would get them out for getting set up for church, so I'm going to end it now and ask Lynn to close us with prayer.
Dear Lord, thank you so much that we can gather together another Sunday and learn more about how you want us to live our lives, Lord, to study your word. Lord, we thank you today for this lesson on forgiveness, Lord, and help us to remember that by forgiving others, we lift the burden off of us, along with the burden being lifted off of the person we have forgiven. Lord, be with us today as we go to service, and also when we gather again to vote on what the church will decide as we go forward. Lord, we ask even now that you continue to speak to us and lead us as to the direction you want us to go. Keep us all safe during the week and healthy. In your son's name we pray. Amen.